Hello and welcome to The Evolutionary. My name is David Knox. I'm still your host, and I'm excited to welcome you to episode number 80. And this is a special episode because, as you may know, we shifted our format last week to doing live stream shows on Facebook and YouTube. Now, of course, we will still publish the audio from those shows in the classic podcast format so that you can still listen at the gym or in church. But going forward, we'll be doing most of our shows live. Now, this episode is an interview that I did with Alan Steinfeld, who is a mainstay in the UFO and ET community, and I'll tell you about him in a moment. But I did this one a while ago, and I've just been kind of sitting on it while I figured out what I wanted to do with the show going forward. Anyway, I'm excited to share it with you. It's a really good talk. It's germane to the evolutionary discussion, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. So let me tell you about Alan. Alan Steinfeld is a writer, public speaker, television talk show host, and event coordinator. For the past 25 years, he has developed a unique brand of consciousness-raising activities under the umbrella of New Realities. Since childhood, Alan has experienced extraterrestrial realities. In fact, he experienced an abduction in 1987 that incited a permanent shift in his consciousness. Since then, he has been obsessed with all things related to UFOs and ETs, and has lectured on these topics all around the world. Also, he was executive producer of 2 featured documentaries on the subject, one called The Hidden Hand by James Carmen, and the other called Calling All Earthlings by Johnathan Berman. He has also been one of the main emcees for most of the last decade at Contact in the Desert, the largest UFO gathering in the world. He organized a thing called the UFOs and Consciousness Forum for the Friends of the Noetic Institute. He provided media coverage for the Citizens for UFO Disclosure at the National Press Club, and interviewed astronaut Edgar Mitchell about growing up in Roswell, New Mexico. His new book is called Making Contact: Preparations for the New Realities of Extraterrestrial Existence. Making Contact is an anthology of essays featuring contributions from many of the leading experts in this field, including Linda Moulton Howe, Whitley Strieber, Grant Cameron, Daryl Anka, Mary Rodwell, Carolyn Corey, J.J. and Desiree Hertok, as well as the late Professor John Mack, and Nick Pope, former Assistant Minister of Defense in the UK, working in their program that investigated UAPs, which is what they call UFOs these days, stands for Unexplained Aerial Phenomenon. Alan believes that only when we integrate the outer awareness of the cosmos with the inner nature of the soul, we will, as human beings, come into harmonious balance with all of creation. For more information about the book or to visit his YouTube channel, please see the links in the show notes. And with that, here we go with Alan Steinfeld. Cool. Hello and welcome to The Evolutionary. My name is David Knox. I'm still your host, and today we have got a really, really special guest, and his name is Alan Steinfeld. Many of you might recognize that name. He is a mainstay in the field of UFOs, ETs, UAPs, whatever you want to call it these days. And we have a wonderful show planned for you today. Alan, so good to have you on. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I'm not just UFOs. The whole thing is about perception, consciousness, and what is the nature of reality, basically. That's really been my interest. And I think, and we'll get into it, UFOs are the most challenging part of reality.
Yeah, we will get into that. And matter of fact, we'll spend a lot of the show on it. I wanted to kind of tee it up and let people understand why it is I asked you to be on the show and how this fits into kind of the evolutionary framework. And so at the very highest level, the premise behind the evolutionary is that we kind of are starting to agree now as a society that we live in a holographic fractal evolutionary universe. And if you add a conscious universe into that as well, then what we have is we live in a holographic fractal intentionally evolutionary universe. And therefore, we would then be a holographic fractal representation of the universe. And if all of that's true, then the thing that the universe wants us to do above whatever else we can think of that we can observe is that it wants us to evolve with intention. And this is kind of when we look around our lives, we see that this is what's happening is we're being incited to evolve persistently and forever by the universal mind. And when we get when we get on board with this, a couple of things happen. One is that things kind of start to go more smoothly in our manifestation practice because we stop fighting this current of evolution. We stop trying to manipulate and control the details of our lives, which are really just an expression of who we are. And instead we get focused inside and we start to evolve ourselves, and then the circumstances of our lives kind of transform around us. That is, it's the missing piece in the law of attraction. It's the secret to the secret. But then the other thing that it does when you get on board with involving your own life with intention is it is the single most powerful thing that any of us can do to evolve the species, right? So there's a lot of people out there talking about evolving the species, and they're out there trying to get everyone else to evolve, but that's not going to work. No, that doesn't work. You can't make me evolve. I can't make you evolve. I can support you. I can be a role model. Well, I'm not going to be a role model for you. I think it'd probably be the other way around. But that's the best we can do is evolve ourselves. And then whatever actions we take in the world that come out of that place of being more in tune with the universal mind and evolving our lives is going to be more inspired and on point in terms of its efficacy at helping the ascension of humanity. So that's kind of the backdrop. And when you look at the field that you're in, Alan, you'd be hard pressed to find a field that is more rich with opportunity with respect to the evolutionary conversation, right? Because the evolution of humanity is going to include the awareness of the ET presence in our universe, in our galaxy, in our solar system, on this earth, right? And so, and then this ties directly into the part of the evolutionary dynamic that we're talking about right now in our solo casts, where we're talking about expanding our worldview. It's a prerequisite if you want to start to evolve yourself, that you evolve your worldview first, because it's foundational to everything else that, you know, it's everything we think, feel, do, and say, and how we perceive. And so it's important to expand our worldview, and expanding our worldview to include the extraterrestrial phenomenon it's not up for debate. It's where we're going, and it's where many of us already are.
Well, people
Right,
are
but
debating it, and but I agree with you. But I do want you to clarify one point. What do you mean by evolution? What is your definition? Yeah, expanded worldview, but I think you're using it in other ways. What do you mean?
yeah, when I talk about evolution in the show, we're talking about everything, the evolution of everything. So the evolution of the universe, the evolution of biological life on any planet, the evolution of you as an individual, which not only includes improving how you are able to interface with your environment in this world, but also might include actually evolving physically, evolving your
Is
perceptive.
evolving though? I just want an upgrade. Is evolving what you're saying a change for the better? Is that what you mean by evolution,
Well,
or is
if
it
we're talking
parallel
about
evolution? Yeah,
intentional evolution, then
yeah.
yes, it would be an upgrade for what we think is for the better. Now, we might have some experience through life that shows us that maybe that was a sidetrack, but that's all part of the evolutionary game, right? So absolutely, it would be upgrades.
Is there anything like, I don't mean to interview you, but is there, I just want to get clear where you're
Yeah.
coming from. Is there unintentional evolution or is it always intentional?
Yeah, well, I'm look around at your friends and family, right? So a lot of people are not aware of this. They're not having intention with respect to their evolution. And it's not that they're not going to evolve, but they're not evolving with intention. And so life is coming at them. The universe is going to incite you to evolve, right? But if
Yeah.
you don't have your own evolutionary curriculum in mind, you don't have your own end game in mind, then where that path leads is probably, the point of that would probably be to lead you to that path where you go, oh, I need to be intentional about this, right? So yes, you're going to evolve anyway. But think about the evolution of a species, of any other animal on the planet. They don't live and die. You know, a bird doesn't wake up and go, I think I'm going to evolve, a better way to fly or something. You know, hummingbird, little birds didn't wake up and go, I'd rather flap my wings back and forth and get thrust both directions like a hummingbird. Um, but the mind of the species did. And that takes a long time. That means you have to grind through a lot of individuals in that species in order to get those upgrades that we're talking about, right? We're special because we have volition, we have free will, and we have intelligence and intention, and we can actually make changes to ourselves in our lifetime.
You might like the book of I think it's Sat Prem on the mother and Aurobindo. They talk a lot about what you're saying from a very spiritual point of view about becoming a new species. And before it was fashionable to say that, they talked about that in the 30s from Aurobindo especially, and the mother. So
Yeah,
there's a
Aurobindo's been coming up a lot for me, so I think it's time to dive in.
I have to say, the deepest meditation I ever had was sitting by Sri Aurobindo's Samadhi site and in India and in Pondicherry, and going so deep. People were shaking me to wake. I was just so deep in a space. It was incredible
That's
and
awesome.
conscious, and just things were going on. Yeah. Anyway,
That's beautiful.
yes.
So I guess to wrap this up, um, one of the things that we need to start doing in our evolution is consider all three aspects of expanding consciousness. And in the evolutionary, what we talk about with respect to expanding consciousness, that there's three aspects to it. There's awareness, right? There's understanding, and then there's actualization of that understanding. Okay.
Hmm.
And so with respect to the ET phenomenon, uh, being aware is just the first step, right?
Right.
And then the next step is understanding, and part of that is going to be bolstered by communication. And when we talk about communication with ETs, our language systems are not going to cut it, right? And so now we're talking about new skill sets, new sensorial capabilities that need to be developed, and perhaps, maybe they're already there latent. Maybe they're actually constitute a new evolutionary aspect of humans. But this is something that we see happening. People are having success in this, and so we're going to be able to develop a new skill set, and that's part of the evolution of humanity, is being able to have a richer understanding of what's going on with that phenomenon, and that will illuminate a lot for us about our own nature and the universe.
Right. I don't know if you can understand the new paradigm from the old paradigm. You can't, if you're a hunter gatherer, it's hard to understand why you would stop doing that and start to stay in one place and grow your food. There's we're touching on in this awareness of this galactic part of ourselves, or this connection that yes, we're part of a bigger picture, but it's in a way not understandable from the world. Even those people in transition of worldviews, I mean, some people are taking a stab at it, but it's not fully landed. This, in my opinion, this new way of being. And yeah, there are people, yes, at the forefront of an evolutionary process where they're being more right-brained or whole-brained, because we're not going to understand this. And I've read a lot of John Mack. You know who John Mack is?
Mhm.
He is one of the great thinkers of the UFO phenomena. He was a psychiatrist. You know him at the Harvard Medical School. He was a professor there, but he was saw patients as a psychiatrist. And he said, when he started to meet these people, said, "Oh, I've had these UFO experiences, and this is what happened to me, and I was abducted." He said there was no way he could fit that into his worldview. There was nothing that, no resources he had. So what he chose, or what the choices were, you could say these people are crazy. You could say they're lying in order to kind of make up a story. You could say that maybe there's something here that I need to expand my perceptions of reality in order to fathom. And he chose, the latter. And Harvard said to him, you can't say there are people seeing ETs and UFOs and be a professor at Harvard. And of course, there was a whole trial with Danny Sheehan, and he said, yes, I can. It's the freedom of speech. And Harvard said, just create a new pathology for these people, because obviously it can't be real. It can't be real at all. No one has ever prepared us for this. Yeah, we have television shows and movies and stories, but when you see it, when you actually see that thing in the sky, and I've seen it, it's like, really? What? It's like, even me, not like I'm special, but I prepared myself, but it's like, could that be? I still have no place to put this in the conditioned program worldview that I was brainwashed and conditioned to think is reality. So it's a stretch for every single person. This is why the government is having such a hard time coming out with the truth, because first of all, nobody knows what the truth is, because there are many truths. There's no cohesive understanding of the phenomena. Everyone has a little piece. And that's why this book is a collection of essays. It's not my belief. I'm in there. I wrote an essay, but there's 11 other people who have their point of view. And I thought that is probably the best way to present the material, as a mosaic, where it's not my idea that fits a bit, but many different overlapping and intersecting research and beliefs that about this phenomenon. And then the reader can say, okay, what makes sense? What doesn't make sense? Where do I need to stretch? But we all need to stretch, I'm saying, because there's no place to put this in our world. Even the world that we're in, David, even the kind of New Age spiritual world, when these beings arrive in your living room or in your dreams, yeah, some of them are friendly and some of them are not so friendly. It's a shock. I would have to say it's traumatic. At least that's my experience. It's like our worldview is so limited, and like it's like looking out a window through like this narrow, and suddenly the window is ripped wide open. It's like, Plato's parable of the cave, the guys in the cave, and all he thinks is his world is made of shadows, and then suddenly he goes out of the cave and there's this whole incredible world that he can't make sense of. That's where we are now in this moment of evolution, because it is an evolutionary moment in history that we are at the threshold of. So this is a great program to talk about this. Thank you.
Yeah. About the book, I just wanted to go over the lineup really quick, because it's just phenomenal, the people that you gathered together to write this book. And of course you edited it, you wrote the foreword, the introduction, or you wrote the introduction and the epilogue, and of course you have an essay in it.
Yeah.
But you have Nick Pope, Grant Cameron, JJ and Desiree Hertak.
But I think we should just, but for people who don't know those names, let me just describe. When you say Nick Pope,
Right.
just so people know,
Okay.
I mean, there are people probably do know who he is, but he worked for the Ministry of Defense in the UK investigating UFOs as a citizen. And he starts off the book because he says, and it's in the opening line, every story has to have a villain. And the villain in his case is the part of government that wants to keep secrets, that needs to keep secrets, according to Nick, that has an understanding there's something there, and we're not going to tell you what it is. And he starts the book off like that. The reason to keep the secrets, yeah, national security, whatever you want to say, but he's an inside guy, Nick, and he's a great guy, and he's, English, has a great sense of humor, but the book starts off with the cover up and the secrecy and why it's there. And then, the second chapter is Grant Cameron, who's investigated every US president since Roosevelt and their relationship to the phenomena. So he also comes from a kind of fact based interpretation of the phenomena, except he, at some point in his research, had an awakening where he said, no, it's not about the hardware, it's about the software, it's about human beings. And maybe this is all about waking us up to being more conscious. So that really starts to go where I wanted the book to go, which is down that avenue of what does this have to do with us? Yeah. And it reminds me of a quote that Jacques Vallée, who I'm sure you know, the French guy who worked with J. Allen Hynek and was featured in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and he said, if I find out that extraterrestrials and UFOs are just visitors from another planet, I'm going to be very disappointed. Because, and this is one of the reasons the government has changed their whole branding from UFO, unidentified flying object, to unexplained aerial phenomena, because they're realizing, and it's a little hint about what they really do know, this is not about objects. This is not about little green men from Mars, outer space, land. This is a much bigger enchilada. This is a much bigger, and it's about the phenomena itself and how it interfaces and affects who we essentially are. It really, really does. And that's the history that I think I'll go over in my next book, but it's the history of why this has been kept a secret, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so that's Grant Cameron, and then you have JJ and Desiree Hertog.
And do you know who they are, JJ and Desiree Hertog?
They live here in Sedona, don't they?
Yes, they do. They're there right now in Sedona. You should
Yeah,
meet them.
I've been in the room with them. I have not met them yet. I didn't hang around. It was actually, you might have been there. It was a channeling. A couple got up and did a channeling
Oh
of.
yeah, no, they don't go to channelings. Because they their work, they're spiritual teachers, and they're good friends of mine, and they are actually, I'm doing a show with them tomorrow. I'll invite you to that. They are, and you might want to interview them. They have a great cosmology. They're one of the few people that include spirituality and ETs and interdimensionals in their worldview, and that's something they teach. But they wrote an actual chapter in not just the physical ETs, but maybe these higher dimensional ETs. So that's their chapter. And it's like, because my experience is that these beings do not really exist in our 3D reality. They can show up in our 3D reality. But have you ever seen anything like that, David? Do you know?
I have a couple of instances where I've seen stuff in the sky that made me go, hmm.
Good. Well, that's a start. But when
Yeah,
they land and they
I've
show
not
up
seen that.
and they appear in your room or in your dreams, there's something that happens that it's not just like somebody visiting. I look at you, I know you have a mother and father, you eat, you sleep, you do all the things humans do. There's something very shocking and unnerving. I was going to say unworldly, but unnerving about being in the presence of these beings, because their vibrational frequency, their pure essence of being, it's distorts our reality. It's so different. They're not just from another planet. Their vibratory rates are drastically different than what we know to be human beings or animals or anything 3D on planet Earth. They're not of this world, is my best sense of them. So JJ and Desiree Hertog talk about that a little bit, about meeting them on an even playing field. And then the fourth chapter, so those what I call I break the book down into three basic categories. There's the investigators, there's the researchers, and they're sort of almost interchangeable. The researchers are a little more up close, in your face contact with the phenomena. The Hertogs are that too, and they're experiencers as well. But there's investigators, researchers, and experiencers, and the experiences I break down in a few categories. But the investigators are more hands off. The researchers, just in how I framed it, because I want to make a difference, are more hands on. They're talking to the abductee, they're talking to the contactees, they're trying to put together the picture. And the best person, the one I feel most, the highest on the totem pole with the most authority, is Linda Moulton Howe.
Sure.
She's been doing this for, I
Legend
think,
in the field.
she's legend and still at it, an incredibly intelligent person. That's the other thing I want to say about these researchers, all of them. They're not just people saying, oh yeah, I think there's UFOs. These are very intelligent, sophisticated minds that have thought long and hard about this situation and are not just jumping to conclusions. Not one of them are saying, oh, yeah, these are people from Mars, or yeah, they're here to invade the planet. I mean, that's, well, that's not even true, and it's primitive. And, it is so evolutionary, David, this field, that in order just to consider what we're talking about, we need to suspend everything we know about the old paradigm, the old worldview. It's like, the horse. It's like horse and buggy thinking. The car comes along and everyone has a little horse and buggy, and they say, "What do we need those type of machines? We have this very fine horse and carriage that will take us everywhere. There's no need for some kind of mechanical thing you have to feed with gas. Look." Horse and buggy, and it's like we're still horse and buggy thinking about the nature of reality, and suddenly a jet plane has shown up in our reality, and we're still riding horses. So if that makes sense, this is the huge shift that we are up against as evolutionaries.
Hmm.
Really, as evolutionary thinkers. It's like, how do we cognize something we don't recognize? You know the difference between cognition and recognition? I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Recognition is to recognize. You've seen it before. It's familiar to
Exactly.
you,
But
right?
how do you cognize anything? What's the process of cognition? Is my question to you.
Yeah. Well, I'll throw it back to you. You clearly have an answer that's well thought out.
Well, I have an answer like, how do we actually know anything? And actually, when I talk about this in my lectures, I show this clip from The Miracle Worker with about Helen Keller with Mary Duke and Annie, what's her name? And one who was in in Mrs. Robinson, and Bancroft. And Bancroft is playing miracle worker, who's trying to teach this deaf, dumb, blind child how to speak, and she doesn't cognize anything. She doesn't cognize anything. It's just pure chaos and sensory input. But as she's like pumping this water, what was her name? The miracle worker. Anyway, she's putting Helen Keller's hand under the water, and then like making these little motions in her hand about what that is. And like suddenly there's a moment of revelation where the gestures in the hand match the sensory awareness outside, and that's cognition. That moment where you see something and someone says it's not just a blur. It's like, oh yeah, this is a table and you have to learn, or this is a chair. As a child, we don't know. It's all the same. It's just all a blob. But suddenly it's there's a distinction made. And they use that word distinction a lot in like the forum. It's all about distinctions. Have you taken the forum? Yeah. Well, anyway, that's a distinction. That distinction of that shape different from that shape is cognition when you learn that. And then you see that shape somewhere else and and you recognize, or you've seen a picture of a horse your whole life in a book and it's a pattern you recognize of this animal looking like this, and suddenly you see a horse and it's like, "Oh my God, that's a horse." Now the recognition rings home because you're no longer seeing a picture. It's the actual object itself that you can recognize. But you know what? If you didn't have someone showing you that's a horse, or let's say you never saw an elephant, or you would think that is such a weird looking horse or something like that. So, what I'm saying here is we are identifying UFOs as unidentified flying objects. That's, and what we really need to do is bring the whole disclosure out on the table so we can start to qualify the actual things of this next level of reality. We're being held back from our cognitive functions because the government doesn't know how to say we don't know what this is. So let's just all cognitively come together as a species and start to redefine reality based on these new categories of experience. This is something Benjamin Franklin did when he sort of discovered electricity with Priest. I think that guy's name was Priest. And they kind of came upon this new science and they said to each other, "We're not going to make any judgments. We're not going to put this in its own box. We're going to let this new science of electricity unfold with its new ways of understanding it. There's no box to put this in, so there's nothing we can say about it that will make sense. So there's nothing we can say about this phenomena that makes sense. It stopped making sense. There's no way in the old worldview that the new worldview makes sense. It's nonsense."
But I think
Basically, I'm going through it very slowly, this whole
but I think
process.
what you're saying is that let's treat it like we would treat any new field of study, and we don't know anything about it, but we have data, right?
Yeah,
So we can
yeah,
start to build a taxonomy. We can start talking about attributes. We can start
yes,
talking about behaviors. We can
yes.
chronicle these things, and which is what science does, right? I mean,
Actually,
science has been
I
studying
have to
things that
write
it
down.
doesn't understand for a long time.
I'm going to write this down because what you're saying is really good. So we have data, right? So we have to, what did you say, qualify this thing?
Well, we have data, right? We things are coming in. Just let's track that. Let's create a taxonomy of of uh, of visual sightings, of behaviors, of maneuverability that we see in crafts, of people's experiences of whether it was in a dream or an abduction or some other type of direct contact, and start classifying. And I know this is happening on a very unofficial kind of loose basis within this field, right? Where people, you can go out and find taxonomies of various ET types that are supposedly in our galaxy or in our
Yeah,
universe
right.
or on Earth. But let's
Mhm.
do it scientifically. Let's gather that. Well, like John Mack started doing, where he interviewed all of these people, and like a true scientist said, I don't have room in my worldview for what I'm encountering here, so I have to open up my worldview.
Exactly. And we're being not just kept, and denied, we are being well, Linda Moulton Howe calls it abused by being kept in the dark
Sure.
because the government, and because they don't know what it is, they don't know how to say we have a trillion-dollar defense budget, and we have no idea how to defend ourselves against these things. Not that we need defense against those things. It's not about defense, of course. If you're a hammer, if you're a defense department, if you're a hammer, the world looks like a nail.
That's
So
right.
if you're defending yourself, everything has to be defended against. So,
Everything's a
um,
threat.
but you know what you just said is a real key point that I'm working on in my next book is about the taxonomy of experience and how do we qualify it and quantify it when there's absolutely no reference for it. You don't have your mother saying this is a horse. You have no one saying anything to you. You have people channeling, and I love channeling, but I'm very suspect of it. You know, people say I'm channeling the Pleiades or I'm channeling this person, or it's like, okay, and I think I'm gonna go get a glass of water. Thank you.
Okay. I'm
No,
with
I've seen incredible channels too. I've seen the best and the
you. Have
worst.
one in the book.
I have one in the book. Oh, Bashar, but he's actually,
Well,
yeah,
you have Darrell
Daryl,
Lincoln in the book, yes.
Daryl Anka, right, but he's not writing as his channel. He's writing as himself, which I thought was much more valuable because a channel, I have to say, as far as this book goes, would pollute this because this is not about, I mean, it's hypothesis and theory, but this is not about off-world guessing. And channeling's not that. I'm a channeling snob. I've seen the best. But I'm saying as far as the UFO phenomena, I I take channels about this with a grain of salt, where whatever star system they're from, and they may be accessing that state of consciousness. I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying let's ground it first in real world phenomena, in the phenomena, like you said, like as data and the experiences of people before we go into the sort of metaphysics of it. Let's go into the physics of it and let's just keep it real. We can hypothesize, we can guess, but when we open the channeling door, you don't know what we're going to let in, and it's okay. But I really wanted to ground this book into something people could like hold on to, you know?
I think that was wise, and I think you did a good job, especially in the selection of everyone. And when it comes to Daryl,
Mm.
if you had him write as Bashar, that the thing that you've done with the book is you've taken all of these people who have done an immense amount of research and had a lot of experience of their own, and they bring that to the table and they set it on there, and they have maybe some hypotheses, but the overarching thing is there's something going on here that we don't understand. Let's talk about it. And when you get Bashar involved, it's very
Right.
definite. It the
Right. And I didn't
questioning
want Bashar
stops, and
because
this is how it is, right?
I
And
wanted
that's not what
Daryl, that's exactly right. I wanted Daryl, who's had a 38-year relationship with this consciousness, but I wanted his perspective on it because we want to grow ourselves up from the human realm towards the stars. Because if we start with the stars and come down, we've lost most of our audience, I think. And
yeah, that's fair.
and
It just wouldn't fit in with the lineup and the vibe of the rest of the chapters, I think.
well, it wouldn't fit in with what I'm really trying to do, which is grow people up and myself from the bottom up, from your feet on the ground to a worldview that, and the chap after Linda Moulton Howe talks about her ex John Mack, who has been not around for about 20 years, had a talk that he gave, right, maybe 2002, that was never published. And I went to his archivist because I knew John Mack. He was, I wouldn't say a friend, but I mean, we had conversations. He was a great guy, a brilliant mind, and probably one of the most important figures in this whole field because he legitimized it by being a psychiatrist and professor at Harvard, and of course got a lot of flack from that. But I published this essay or this well, it was a talk he gave, and then he actually wrote an essay, but it was never published before, so it was a real exciting coup, I thought, to put in this book because
Yeah.
it reads, because he was so far ahead of his time with his whole understanding of worldviews and what's possible, it reads as if it could have been written yesterday, and that's the kind of visionary he was because this is like a 200 or 300 year process that we're in now that started maybe in 1947. And so we're at the very beginning of a new age, and maybe that was the birth of the Aquarian age or something. But you know, you know that old Schopenhauer quote about truth. I'm sure you've heard it, right?
Nope.
You know Arthur Schopenhauer, the German philosopher. Do you know who
Heard
he
of him.
was?
I've heard of him.
Very important because he didn't come out of like the tradition. He was kind of an original thinker. So he says truth passes through three stages. First, it's ignored, then it's ridiculed, and then it's self evident, right? So we're just coming through the ridicule stage into the next stage, but it's not self evident yet. I mean, to some people, it is self evident, and those are the people that are on our team and working. But for most people, you know, the islands in the distance are just deserted islands. We're the only island that has life and cities and animals and, all that. But the rest, maybe not.
Yeah, it's
But
very interesting to
ours, what,
realize
right?
that it's very
Yeah.
interesting to realize that we were all of us brought up to think that we're very unique. There's nothing like us in the universe, and that the universe is dead matter, and matter is all there is. And science has come a long way since then. I mean, we've got Goldilocks zone planets, billions of them in our galaxy alone. So we know there has to be life out there. On so many counts, the materialist paradigm is crumbling all over the place, and yet the regular person in the mainstream still believes because that's what they were taught, and that's not being, what's being realized at the top of the academic structure or whatever
Right.
is not coming down to the streets. And it's going to be a
Right.
bit before that. Fortunately, we have the information age that is kind of speeding that up, and we're at that crux right now. But the materialist paradigm is done, and most intelligent people that you talk to say, yeah, I think there's life out in the cosmos somewhere.
Right.
but,
Of
but
course, they're still trying to keep a cap on it. The Webb telescope that was just launched. It was they're supposed to look at the TRAPPIST-1 solar system, which has all these Earth-like planets in it. Do you know about TRAPPIST-1?
no.
And well, TRAPPIST-1 is about 39 light years from Earth, but the Webb telescope is supposed to look at it and look at these planets and tell us, but it's been kept top secret what they will find when they look at those planets. So, what you said about, yeah, science has told us, well, this is this is the problem with science. There's the science of facts that, like Newton makes your car run and things happen. But when science goes off and uses that same authority that has made this industrial world and digital world so viable, when they say things like, oh, yeah, we're living in a dead universe and there probably isn't any life out there. That's what I call scientism, the religion of science. And scientists themselves do not make a distinction between what they believe and what they know. And that's upset the whole paradigm that we are struggling, me and you and probably everyone listening, to break out of. Is there really life out there? Are we not the only ones? Are we not the top of the food chain? I mean, like we've been told. I mean, are we not the smartest guys on the block? And when these UFOs appear, and the government, the Navy has admitted, yeah, there's these objects that seem to hover over water and take off at 20,000 miles a second, go through and make these right degree turns. And we don't know who they are. They're probably Russian or Chinese, but we don't know how they got their technology. They don't say probably. I'm saying that, but they're not willing to say this is from another intelligence that is not human. They don't say the A word. They're refusing to say the alien word. They will say everything but. I mean, I read a lot. I read everything I can on the subject, and people like Luis Elizondo. I'm sure you know him. He's coming forward as like the leader in the disclosure movement. He was a former intelligence agency person that started to investigate UFOs. Have you heard about him, Luis Elizondo?
I've heard about him.
Luis Elizondo. He is at the forefront of disclosure because he worked for a government Pentagon agency called ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. He was given this job, I'm not sure, in 2007 or something, and to look at this footage, and he goes something like, oh my God, these UFOs are real. I mean, they're real. And he's so shocked by it, this is my interpretation. He wants to tell everyone that this stuff is real. And he goes to his higher ups in the Pentagon and goes, how come we're not talking about this? What's going on? And he said, shh, we're not telling anyone about this. And he's saying, why are we not? And so he's really at the forefront. He's really a hero for some people, a government agent for others, a disinformation person for some. I think for the most part he's sincere. This is my opinion. You're going to get a lot of people in this field, and it's such a kind of insular field that everyone's always talking about everyone else and this and that. But when you get inside that field, it's kind of funny. And that's how I got to know everyone. I worked my way into this field, so I went to all the conferences and lectures and saw John Mack as much as I could in New York and Bud Hopkins and all these like all stars. And you get to know them. You go out to dinner with them. You have deep conversations. They become your friends. So I called these people up and said, "Hey, would you like to write a chapter?" And that's like, and I think I got the people that I most respect. I mean, there's some people I would have liked to have gotten in there, Richard Dolan, Steve Bassett, but for the most part, the people I wanted to write and contribute their thoughts on this topic, because for most of people in this book, this is a lifelong study. This is the never-ending story. This is the puzzle that you're trying to put together, and you don't have all the pieces, and you're trying to make sense of this jigsaw puzzle, and you just have a couple of corners here and there, and there's this whole middle thing that's still empty. And it's like that's what makes it so exciting, so challenging, and so intellectually stimulating, is that what is this thing? How do we make sense of the unknown? How do we know the unknown and maybe the unknowable? That's what excites me about this. We're at the forefront of a discovery that there's no box and there's no way to qualify it, and what could be more exciting than that? Grant Cameron calls it the Super Bowl of all stories. So I have John Mack writing a chapter in there about worldviews and what it takes to really shift your worldview and wake up to some new realities. And he talks about the subtle implicate order of David Bohm. You know David Bohm's work, The Implicate Order.
Hmm.
Basically, that everything in the universe is connected by some subtle underlying connection that is not obvious. It's implicated, but it's not an explicit order. The explicit order is the local order, the implicate order is the non local order. So John Mack writes his chapter based on the subtleties of the realm of the implicate order. And it's very intelligent. And, my favorite quote in the John Mack essay and in his talks is that UFOs are like a outreach program from the universe for the consciously impaired. And that's us.
That's beautiful.
It's beautiful and
um,
very funny.
before we get off of
Yeah,
off of it, and move on to the next chapter,
yeah,
Whitley Strieber. I wanted to, you
yeah.
mentioned something about government cover-ups and the threat identification program. And something that's out there in the ether sphere, and that I've been aware of for a long time, is this idea that the military industrial complex is fundamentally taken over, at least is extremely powerful, and they're not elected officials, and they're extremely well funded. And
Exactly.
that they had since the Eisenhower time, it's that famous speech that Eisenhower gave on his way out of office.
Yeah.
And
Beware of the most of
there's
the.
going to be three plays that they have lined up already. And the first one is going to be communism. We got to fight communism, keep the money coming in. The second
Does
one's,
Eisenhower say that?
um, I think he might have.
Okay,
I don't
okay.
recall.
Communism,
Second play
yes.
is second play after communism is done with, and it kind of plays out, which took a while. Then we're going to have terrorism, and we're going to work that terrorism thing for a while, and that came in, and that's actually, frankly, kind of played out. And the third one is going to be extraterrestrial threats. And
I don't
so,
think Eisenhower says that though. I think someone else said that, but because I don't
um,
think Eisenhower ever directly mentioned extraterrestrial threats. I mean,
you're
I'm
probably right
talking
about
about,
that.
yeah.
So anyway, let's talk about that for a second. Stephen Greer is very open, very almost aggressive about saying, okay, look, extraterrestrials, if they wanted us gone, it would be a click of a button, it would be over. And so there's no actual threat there, but be aware, because there's going to be false flag operations from government and black ops agencies that are going to make it look like we're under attack, and therefore we're going to get more money to keep the military industrial machine rolling. And then this thing comes out, in the New York Times in 2017 with the tic tac making all those amazing maneuvers. So it makes someone like me very wary of any governmental disclosure. I'm
I
watching.
first of all have to say I do not agree with Stephen Greer about the false flags. I don't see that happening. I think there's enough honest, I can't say politicians, but enough people who genuinely are interested in this in Congress that know it's not a threat. Even Danny Sheehan, who's Luis Elizondo's lawyer, because they tried to, when he started to come forward with disclosure, they tried to erase his record, and he has a whistleblower complaint into the inspector general, the IG. And so I don't think, they're coming out, they're going to come out. That was done in 1932 with the Orson Welles um, broadcast, and that didn't go over very well. I don't think the false flag narrative that some people are proclaiming is is going to happen. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be weary of what the government is telling us, you know. But on one level, the government probably won't tell us the truth. On another level, the government is like the church in the Middle Ages. Copernicus says the Earth is not the center of the universe. The Galileo says that he's put in prison for acknowledging that, and so until it was actually officially said. So what the government, and I think there's some name for the official sanctioning of reality, and like those scientists that told us that the universe was lifeless, there's until there's going to be a battle of worldviews until not disclosure because they've disclosed, but what's being called within the UFO field confirmation. It means okay, here are the ships, here are the bodies, here's the technology. That when that's rolled out, and that's the demand, more than let's say, oh yeah, there's something out there like Obama said, and we don't know what it is. That still keeps it vague. It's not until they really confirm it that, boom, the worldview of the planet. And I think it'll be an important moment in history. And I think it's coming. That's why
Yeah.
my book is called the subtitle Preparations for the New Realities of Extraterrestrial Existence. The preparation is just the fact that it exists and these intelligent people have been looking at it and experiencing it. So, um, Yeah, I think so. There's two sides to the government disclosure. First, yeah, they're the official word on reality, not the government, but that general media, political media display. And we can't trust them either. I do agree with that part. So,
Yeah, that's fair. I would like to inject that, and then we put that one to bed, the false flag thing. Um, I haven't seen a false flag alien thing, which is good. None of us have. Um, if if something happens on the Earth that looks like an alien invasion, but it's not very successful, but people die and some stuff is blown up, but it's unsuccessful, that's a false flag. Because with alien technology, if they can travel across the cosmos to get here, then if they were aggressive towards us, they wouldn't come in and just poke us, blow up a city. That I mean, they would just take us out or dominate us or whatever. They have the technology to do that. So
we're anthropomorphizing the other, which is not a good thing to do. We're making them respond like humans. This is what humans do. They find a new land, they conquer it, they enslave the people. These things have not only been going on since 1947, which you know for sure, but probably for thousands of years. They've been coming and going. They're if they want, like you said, if they wanted to take over, they're not doing that. They're playing it in a very calculating way where maybe they'll appear over Phoenix and the whole city will see it, and then they'll be gone. And it's like, what did you see? This is the slow rollout of self-evident knowledge. It's only when everyone realizes that ETs exist will they actually show up in the real world. They're not going to do what the cargo cults did in World War II. You know about the cargo cults
mhm.
that happen where sophisticated equipment would show up on these islands and then they will worship. They're very aware, I feel, because they would have done all these things blown up. They're not doing that. We don't have to
They're not
project
going
our,
to.
our very primitive warlike um, uh, impulses onto these beings that are obviously more sophisticated technologically, probably sociologically, um, and psychologically. They know what humans are, and they're not doing the human thing. So
So
I'm
you
not even considering
So,
that.
Alan, you and I are saying the same thing, is
Yeah,
that there's not going to be any military attack. That is really primitive, right? That's
right,
not going to be something that we
right.
experience from these higher
That's right. And
beings.
and the government is not going to plan that either. They're not
I
that
like that.
stupid. They know this thing has been around for years. My feeling is they're going to slowly tell us there's life in the universe. They're going to slowly tell us there's things that have come, crashes, there's bodies. We don't know what they are. And then at some point, they're going to say, we're not alone. And there's a whole new history to cosmology. And it's going to be a renaissance
Hmm.
of new ideas and ideologies, like the Renaissance in Europe in the 1500s. That was provoked because new knowledge filtered into the intellectual elite that started to create new ideas about what was possible. And so, as new knowledge filters into not just the intellect, but to the people, we start to formulate new ideologies. This is what evolution is. It's the I feel the ideological evolution is that we start to consider new possibilities that seem impossible, contradictory, and unimagined before. So when new neural nets, when you're stimulated, this is Joe Dispenza's work, when you're stimulated by new activity in the environment and you allow that to come in, new neural nets of perception develop that allow you to create new theories about what's out in the world that were unimagined before. So when these new perceptions light up, the whole organism evolves to a new state of awareness. But it doesn't do that if there isn't any new stimuli in the environment. So we're getting new stimuli, but we're getting it in a very controlled, drip by drip way, and and the people in this book are bursting to just kind of swallow it. And all the people I know in our community saying, "Give it to me." So that's why channeling is like, oh, well, here's something. But anyway, that's what I have
Yeah.
to say.
You know what? I would love to take a break from the chapter
Yeah,
by chapter in
yeah,
the
yeah,
book
yeah, yeah.
and ask you about your own experience, because I know you have quite a bit, and you do go through it in the book. But obviously you didn't land up here in this field without something to drive you there. So can you give us a rundown?
Well, I was always wanted to be an astronaut. I think we're probably about the same age. Astronauts were big, and um, I grew up. Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, I wanted to go out into space. I wanted to be an astronaut. And then it's like, well, that's not very realistic. But I love Star Trek and science fiction, and I can't reason why I actually like why do you like this or that. I mean, there's no reason in longing, as a friend of mine said. There's no reason in longing. It's just what you're drawn to. So I was always drawn to, and even in the arts, like I really love the avant-garde artists, the ones that are outside the box, the one that break the barriers. And I think art itself breaks the paradigm, and that's why I'm actually studying a lot of art as doorways. Like there's a book out, an art book called The Shock of the New. And it's sort of related to, it's not related to UFOs, but I relate it to UFOs because when some new art form comes along, it's rejected. It's like, what? What are they doing? It's like, abstract expressionism or impressionism or expression. These are at first revolted against as something like unacceptable. So I was always drawn to that new thing, to the shock of the new. Of course, Picasso said, if it's known, it's already old. So I wanted to, and for me, it was in the avant-garde, in the arts, in the films, in the what's the new, or in music, like what. Although I don't like a lot of new music, I have to say, but uh, we're stuck on rock and roll. But the new perceptions is something that I get, and that's why I called my show even before I really got into the UFO stuff, New Realities, because um, I think perception is always, we can always be pushing the envelope of what we perceive in the world. How aware can we be? Well, never aware enough. You know, this is what Bruce Lipton said to me, that the process of evolution, according to Lipton, is developing more awareness.
Sure.
And he talks about that on a biological level. So, anyway, I can go into that later if you want to know how evolutionary awareness functions according to Lipton's model. But I was always interested in that. So when, yeah, science fiction was really cutting edge, and oh, and then I had an experience, right? I mean, I would have like these weird, I mean, I looked at spirituality, what was like new and interesting about that, and even people like oh, I was in the East Village. Did you know New York in the '80s in the East Village?
Yeah,
And
I didn't go there until this century, and I just went to Manhattan. So
right, Manhattan, Eastville. Well, there were all these like it's like what the transgender thing is now. There were these transvestites, these men try, wanting to be women. I thought that was such a weird concept. How do you even integrate that? And of course, now it's fashionable, the transgender craze. It's like it's breaking the barriers. It's nothing I want to do, but I really was fascinated observing it because, it's breaking the boundaries of what we believe um, things should be. It's like it's the lucidity is that, or no, it's not luminosity. There's liminal, that liminal zone uncertainty, vagueness, abstraction was something that I wanted to understand and sort of um, not put into a box, but expand upon that idea of nothing. We don't know anything. We just think we do. In my book and other books, I call it the difference between comprehension and apprehension. You know, and
Hmm.
so that brings us right back to the subject we're talking about. What's going on? Well, nobody knows. But anyway, I studied philosophy, I studied all this, and then I had this experience. Yeah. 1987, I'm driving cross country with my girlfriend, who was a very beautiful woman, very open, a real, you know, earth goddess, mother, divine, feminine being. And, we were driving all day from Oregon, of all places, from the country fair
Thank you, fair. Of
in
course.
1987. What? We're driving over the Mackenzie Pass, the Mackenzie Pass into
Hmm.
from Springfield into, well, there's the hot springs there. Do you know the
Yeah.
hot springs
Cougar,
there?
right?
Yeah, Cougar. Yes,
Mhm.
stop at Cougar after the fair just to clean the dust off because it was so dusty there. You've been to the country fair?
I haven't all these years.
Oh, it's a great thing to go through. It's as good as Burning Man or Rainbow Gathering or
That's what
anything
I
like
hear,
that.
but only if you get the vendor pass and get to stay after they close it up and, be there for
Yeah,
the after party.
yeah, that's true. That's true. I think
I
we
have many,
snuck
many,
in.
many friends who attend the fair every year, and I never made it. It was to the time of year once I got into that phase in my life. It was the time of year I was getting ready for Burning Man, and it just never happened.
It's as good as it's actually better than Burning Man, I think, because Burning Man's it's a little hardcore. I've been to Burning Man. I've been to Kumbh Mela. I have to say, the Kumbh Mela makes Burning Man look like a picnic in the park. If you ever want to go to a real intense
I'm taking notes. Kumbh
festival,
Mela.
Kumbh, it's in India every 12 years. The sadhus come out of the caves and yeah, it's intense.
Cool.
Have you heard the Kumbh Mela? Kumbh Mela?
I think that he writes about an autobiography of a yogi. The
Oh
Kumbh.
yeah, he does, because that's where he meets Babaji. Yeah, everyone's there looking for Babaji
That's right.
in the Kumbh Mela. But anyway, so the Oregon Country Fair was the launching point for my experience. We leave Eugene and go through Springfield, stop at the hot springs, go over the Mackenzie Pass to the Sisters, right, and
Hmm.
pick up 80. And we go, and I think we drove from like this Mackenzie Pass all the ways into through, I guess that's Eastern Oregon into Wyoming. Is that Wyoming on the border of Oregon there? Um,
No, that's Idaho.
oh, Idaho, then
Go through Idaho and then
Wyoming.
Wyoming and then Nebraska probably on 80.
Right. We
Yeah,
stopped. I think we drove all the way to Western Nebraska. It was definitely in Western
that's a
Nebraska where we're
long
just
drive.
It was a long drive and we're just really tired and we're on 80 and I think it was North Platte, Nebraska where we pulled off the road and it was like a 12-hour drive or yeah, something like that. But we were refreshed from the hot spring. That it was totally undeveloped at the time. Now I haven't even been there, but in a long time. But I heard it's like really all paved over and just. Have you
Mm,
been there recently?
no. Mm-mm.
Anyway, yeah, it's somewhere around West Platte. We pull off the road, go down off the interstate, down a little road, go down this like find this little place that says, oh, it's a sign says on the side of the road, enter at your own risk. And I thought, oh, those are just irrigation canals that they're probably telling us about. They're not going to fill up there in the middle of the night. So we just pull off the road on the side of this dirt road there and just kind of pass that. We're just really tired and we pass that and we go to sleep. I don't really say this in my story. I don't think I even wrote about this in the book, but I get the feeling before we go to sleep that I feel like we should just turn the van around. So I don't know. So it's like our back doors are facing the other way because we're in a van, but we're just too tired. We don't turn the van around, and we just pull off and park, I guess, that way, the way we come off the road. Then we wake up. I'll fast track, and we wake up in the next morning, and we're in the same position we went to bed in. Now, who even remembers that? I mean, and of course we were tired,
I've
but
had that happen. People have that happen. I can tell you that I've done that and been aware of it maybe 4 times in my life, where I've gone to bed and
I've never
woke
been
up,
aware of that before. And I think this is weird, where,
especially in a van, because I can guarantee you, I have a travel van, and when I'm sleeping in my travel van, I am not dead asleep. I am very lightly sleeping and tossing and turning and stuff.
right, right. So I'm in, yes. So,
Because you're vulnerable, you're out there, right?
yeah, I mean, I wasn't worried about that so much. I felt like, it felt weird getting up in the morning and then we get on the road and we just, drive to stop off and,
And both of you had that same realization that you slept in the same place, you woke up in exactly the same.
well, I called this woman who was with me when I wrote this book, and I said, "Do you remember that night that we slept on the road?" She goes, "Yeah, when we were frozen, like frozen or suspended animation." She remembered it exactly. And this is like, from 1987. This is like 35 years later, 34 when I wrote the book, years later, that she had the exact same memory of it that I did. And, we slept together many nights, but that night we were just, and we really after that had this incredible we had a good connection before that, but our physical connection after that was just, it was just like electric or something. There was something, I don't think I've experienced that with anyone else, but there was something. And, whatever it was, but I had gone back to New York and, it's the summertime, it's like July. And my mother says, "What's that on the back of your knee there? On the back of your leg?" And it was this four-pronged puncture mark. And it's about 4 or 5 days after. And it looks like they were bruised or something like that, but they're starting to heal. And it's like these four little dots that are a little raised up. And I say, "Well, that's probably just a spider bite or something like that, or
Perfectly square
something."
set of spider bites.
I don't know what it was, and I found actual marks just like that on the internet years later, like saying, but I didn't take a picture of it for some reason. But I did happen to meet people, and I did sort of connect it instantly to, but not quite at first, or maybe it wasn't instant, but to that time, that night, sleeping in western Nebraska. I did have a vague thing. Oh, because I had a vague thing because I started to meet people in the abduction community. Like, someone asked me, and this was like a turning point. I'm still a little freaked out by it. This woman asked me to videotape and edit her a dance of her alien abduction, and that was the first like kind of doorway in. Like, I knew about a little bit about aliens, loved Star Trek, but the abduction thing, although I did have weird experiences when I was young, like feel like I was being pulled out of my body. I never saw aliens then, but I did have like out of body stuff. I did have some weird things that were altered states, but the alien thing, no. But anyway, this woman, Christine, and she had reached out to me actually recently, and it's like I was still kind of freaked out the whole thing. I did videotape her abduction, and then I asked her, "Well, what do you think about this mark on the back of my leg?" And because and she goes, "Oh yeah, that's an abduction mark." I said, "Really?" And it just kind of, I have to say, honestly, it freaked me out at first because it's like, really? And then I called my girlfriend up and said, "What do you think happened that night?" Someone said, because that's when I immediately went to that night, and it's like, oh, when could that have happened? It's like that just flashed, and eventually I was regressed. She was regressed actually more immediately, but I started to so I was freaked out on one level, thinking that, oh no, I was abducted, and I was fascinated. It pulled me down the rabbit hole, as I like to say in this field. It sucked me down the rabbit hole where it's like um, horrified and intrigued at the same time, if those two things are possible. So, from there, I actually, that girlfriend had flown out to see me in New York, and we just so happened to be invited to a party by Bud Hopkins. You know who Bud Hopkins is?
Part of Bud Hopkins.
Bud Hopkins is like the godfather of abductions. He's the one that got John Mack and Whitley Strieber and all these people. He was having a party at his somewhere, maybe it wasn't his loft, but it was somewhere. And it was just such a cozy feeling being around all these people that were aware of this experience. So I started to meet the kind of, I would say now, the royalty of the abduction crew. John Mack, Whitley Strieber, Bud Hopkins. It doesn't get any more like David Jacobs, I didn't meet Linda Moulton Howe then, but these are like the Mount Rushmore of the abduction UFO scene. And I just happened to meet these people. Not happened, but it just all was so strange and kind of put me in that position as led 20 or 30 years later to this book. But I was fascinated by the subject of ETs, but not in a kind of science fiction sort of way. Because when you say ETs or UFOs, you immediately think science fiction. I mean, that's what and I do at some point. This is not science fiction. It's hard to describe what it is because immediately it's put in that box, but this is more paranormal, but that's not even a good word. This is more, it's not philosophical. This is a whole other thing. There's this world, and when you start to relate to this other thing, it's not, it's like you opened a door, and it's not like a party going on, but it's like you're all alone in your house and you open the door and there's this incredible thing going on. But if you, so it's like, it's not like anything we know is the best way to describe it without describing it.
And
It's
so to
this
wrap up on your
thing.
experience, though, you went through some regressions and actually
Yes.
kind of tapped into what might have gone on that night.
I, I have to say about regressions, um, it's suspicious. For anyone who says they regressed and they remember, because you're not remembering what you weren't conscious of being aware of. These experiences are not happening in the conscious state. They're happening in a maybe there are people who are much more lucid, and I think Whitley Strieber, who writes the next chapter in the book, is very lucid, so he probably has more conscious recall than most people. I do not. I did not. I mean, I think practicing lucidity in wake and dreams is really a key to holding your own in the presence of these ETs, and I write about that in my chapter. Yeah, I had a regression. So what I want to say about regressions is I was brought back to the time. Okay, I'm sleeping in the van, and the vision comes to me of this light and these beings, but I'm not remembering it because I never forgot it because it never happened to the conscious mind. You know, like I can ask you, do you remember what you did yesterday? Yes, because you were conscious, or what you ate for dinner. It's like, but when you're not conscious, there's no actual explicit memory. It's like what happens in trauma, and it is kind of traumatic. It's like when people are traumatized, they are, what they say, disassociated. So there's no conscious recall because they're not in their conscious mind. So you don't remember what happened, but the implicit can become explicit as far
Okay.
as memory and that. So I don't know. I have to say, as a preface, that's all a preface to say. I don't know what really happened. I don't know if I was making it up, but these images came to me of these beings opening the door, and I actually didn't go far enough to beyond in my regression to see, okay, I felt like I was floated out of the ship. I do have dreams where I'm being floated out of the building and brought onto a craft. After that experience, I did have dreams of that. But in my regression, all I could make sense of was these beings, and one being stood out more than the other. And they didn't look like the typical grays, at least in my vision. They looked more like Kamara Jones's images. You know who Kamara Jones is? Oh, Nadi does. They're basically ETs that are just these big eyes, big heads, no nose, no mouth.
Okay.
And that's sort of what came to me as these beings. But that could just be a screen memory because when you meet these little bug like gray ETs, it's a little horrific. So the mind says, oh, yeah, it was an animal. It was lots of people imagine owls, but they're not owls. That's what your mind does to discuss, to soften the impact of these beings that are just so, they're not even fright. I mean, I guess they are frightening, but they're just so different than anything we know. I mean, there's pictures of them probably on the internet. There's probably real pictures, a lot of fake pictures, but to see one, it's not just how they look. It's like what I said before. It's the vibrational presence is distorting to our field. Like, you've been around people who are like kind of disrupting, people you probably don't want to be around, and they have a sort of field, and you can just feel it. And this is 100,000 times worse than that. I mean, these are like vibrations that are so foreign. They're there's no way to make to integrate it. That's how I feel. So
Okay.
that's sort of where I'm going with
So
that.
anyway, that got you going down the rabbit hole.
Well, that experience got me obsessed. I mean, I must have 500 books on the subject. Had to write my own book on the subject. So it's like, yeah, and I'm still obsessed with it. Like this conversation, as I'm talking to you, I'm still putting together, and you're helping me put together more pieces of the puzzle because, like I say, no one knows what this is about. Do you realize that? This is a subject that nobody knows anything. I mean, yeah, we have some idea, but nobody that I've talked to, and I've tried to talk to everybody, no one understands what's going on.
Hmm.
No one has us. I mean, there are people who have more of a sense probably than I do, but I don't. And maybe Whitley is the one who has probably the most sense, but he's also
Well, he is
bewildered.
next chapter. What's his take on it?
Well, Whitley Strieber probably is the most well known abductee we have. He gave us the face of the ET. He said this was his vision. It was actually a woman, ET, these big eyes, and he drew that on the cover. And some people were shocked by that picture. Some people would have instant recall just by looking at the cover of Communion. Communion was a best selling book. He didn't know anything about any of this. He was a fiction writer. He wrote The Wolfen and Hunger. He wrote these horror films. And he thinks later that maybe he wrote those horror films because he was really remembering some of his disguised interlude with these beings.
Hmm.
Um, so he has this experience, I think 1985 in upstate New York, in Accord, New York, which is outside of High Falls, not far from Woodstock, in a cabin where these beings show up in his room. And he's taken and out into the woods, and he's like he's anally probed, which is all these jokes about Whitley Strieber and the anal probe.
That all started with him, with
It
his book.
totally started with him, and he's still sort of ridiculed by it, which he's insulted by because he says this is what happened. And that is a good book for people who want to make sense or start to get the Communion by Whitley Strieber, 1987, I think it came out. Anyway, Whitley doesn't know what's going on. He hears about Bud Hopkins, who's regressing people in New York. He meets Bud, who introduces himself, and he starts to go back to these experiences, and he starts to realize, like, oh my God. It's like anyone who really feels they've had this encounter, except for the star seeds, or we're all friendly, and I haven't, maybe I've had some of those, I don't know. But it is a shock, and when you start to realize it happened to you, it's like that book is a good part of about how to integrate the phenomena into the human psyche so we can start to evolve to a new frame of understanding. That
Mhm.
book is a doorway into that. And I think it's the first. It's the first that opens the doorway of consciousness into the realm of ET human interface. So he writes a chapter sort of about that, also about his wife Anne, who had died, and how he's connected to her, and how somehow that realm of people who pass over and the ETs are also somehow connected. No one really knows for sure, but they seem to be somehow this other dimensionally related, and I don't know how, because they seem like very different realms. And it's about frequency. It's like once you realize the dial doesn't have to be set to this frequency, and you start spinning the dial to these other frequencies, you realize there's so many more channels on your mind scope, that all you have to do, and this William James said, all you have to do is create the slightest stimulus and other realities appear.
Hmm.
William James, you know William James
No,
from Harvard. Well, I'm giving you a lot of research.
you
William
are.
James is probably one of the most brilliant. Mm, well, he was the father of American psychology, but he actually, I think, invented the word stream of consciousness, or the phrase stream of consciousness. He's probably one of the innovators of consciousness studies as a psychologist.
Okay.
And he knew Jung and Freud. I mean, he knew those people in that day, in his day, and he was also very much into metaphysics and psychic studies. So his brother Henry James was quite of a realist, and actually made fun of William James' psychic studies. He was also at Harvard. William James. Henry James was just a literary master, and the turning of the screw is sort of a kind of it's not quite a spoof on metaphysics, but it's a sort of takedown of William James's psychic studies. So anyway, I got off on a tangent because what was I was talking about the consciousness field and consciousness and
Yeah.
all that. But
I think you were wrapping up Whitley Strieber's
yeah,
section.
Woodley Stryber, yeah. So when it's like I was saying, like yeah, like when we realize that we could shift our consciousness, and this is what drugs do, and other realities appear. The ET thing is another reality. The dead people have passed over is another reality, and there's all these other realities besides this ordinary reality, which we're mostly stuck in. I think that is what people who do DMT, they say they reach this little elf world. Have you done any DMT, the elf world?
I've sat an ayahuasca ceremony a couple of times. I have not had a DMT trip.
And ayahuasca brings you to other worlds, but
Ayahuasca is DMT. It's just got a neuroinhibitor, so it's a plant medicine, right? DMT is just the distillate, actual psychoactive compound from ayahuasca.
But I don't think those other methods actually get you to the world that the people who are real visionary. I mean, this is my opinion, because those worlds are here all the time. When you do ayahuasca or DMT, they sort of appear, but our consciousness is fluid enough to realize that they're actually here all the time. And when you do the substance, it kind of, I would say, breaks our concentration almost of what's possible. I think those other worlds are here. We
Mm-hmm.
just have to make sense of them.
Yeah, I think McKenna's Terrence McKenna's
Yeah.
contention is that most people aren't going to perceive those in their whole lifetime unless they are really disciplined and have a practice that allows them to start opening up their perceptions. But there's a back door. There's a shortcut, and it's called psilocybin or DMT, and you go there. And I think that my opinion is there is some value in that if you're a seeker, if you're using it with intention to go and open up your experiential understanding of what is possible and what is out there, and then to come back into your daily practice and with that understanding, knowing that that's there because you've experienced it, you've seen it, and it gives you kind of not a roadmap to get there, but some idea of where to go.
It does sort of give you idea, but it also can lead you into a wrong direction. I think the backdoor road doesn't quite get you there. I mean, yeah, it gets you the awareness of these other realities for sure. But I don't think it quite, at least in my experience, I did ayahuasca. I've had a great time on ayahuasca, but
You don't hear that very often.
I
I had a
did.
great time heaving my guts out on ayahuasca.
I didn't. I had a really blissful time, I have to say.
Wow. Wow. You should go back and do it again.
I didn't feel like I'd done it twice again. I didn't feel like
If
I
if you
really needed to do it.
if you did it and had a blissful time every time, then just cut your losses. Just stop right there.
No, I just didn't feel like I needed to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, okay, been there, done that, have the t-shirt, it was great. And I think it's much more challenging to find the ET reality and kind of bridge the two worlds somehow than take a red pill out of here. Um, but it's valid for some people. It does. LSD was a big influence on the revolution in art and music in the 60s. It opened up doorways. The dimensions of the mind
Still
were,
doing that.
what's that?
It's still doing that.
Yeah, it's still doing it. All those psychedelics are doing it, but ETs are the next step beyond psychedelic. It's beyond psychedelics. I mean, this is just my opinion. It's the embodiment, not ETs themselves, but the awareness of the transcendental, which maybe that's what they're a part of, if we want to call it something. The awareness of the beingness in that transcendental state that interfaces with those beings in those dimensional realities. And I don't think anyone's really there, but we've opened the door. That's the new paradigm.
Hmm.
Drugs are not going to give us, or psychedelics, whatever you want, plant medicine, whatever you want to call them, aren't going to give us the new paradigm. Maybe LSD did influence the new paradigm, but something else. The doorway into new realities has to do with our integration of the automobile into the horse and buggy system, if that makes sense. It's a whole other
Strangely,
thing.
strangely, it kind of does. Um, there's a couple. We're kind of
Oh,
speaking of non sequiturs. Um,
yes.
what I'd like to do is there's a couple of things I want to make sure that we get to, and
Oh,
we've
yeah.
been talking for a
Yes.
while. Um, and one of them is, and it isn't quite as lofty and heady as what we've been talking about. It's kind of more, where the rubber meets the road. Um, I've been noticing for many years that there's been a progression of UFOs, of the types of crafts that people see in the sky, right?
Yeah.
I think it was Grant Cameron mentioned, I didn't even know that there was a rash of flying wooden ships
Grant does
in the
mention
West,
that. Yeah.
in the West Coast in the late 1800s. But, even if it's part of Americana, of pop culture. You can look at it in the 40s and 50s. It was this wobbly looking tin can thing in the sky, right? All
Mhm.
the way up to the Phoenix Lights, where it's a mile long ship that hovers over the
Right.
valley and everyone sees it, to all of the stuff that people are seeing today. And by the way, there are millions of people around the world who have had these direct encounters.
Yeah.
What's your take on
Well,
that
there's two
progression?
things. I think they're doing stuff that is acceptable to our level of awareness. They're creating they're making these ships appear like these wooden ships in the 1890s, because if we saw a triangular craft, it would be too far out, I think, in the 1890s. That's when the wooden ship thing flying.
Mhm.
So as we progress technologically, they're giving us, whoever they are, they're giving us these craft that are acceptable somewhat to our level of perception.
Yeah, almost like they're matching, they're pacing with what we're able to grok.
Exactly. Or, and the other thing is, and there's two more, what we're actually seeing are the same things we've always seen, except where it's like the natives that couldn't see the ships coming in from South America because they never saw anything like that. So they're seeing something in the sky and they're saying, oh, it's a wooden ship, because that's all they were capable of actually associating
Sure.
with these things in the sky. So that's one next level. The other, the other and the most, I tend to agree with the second, but the other most ridiculous thing is like, oh yeah, they're evolving their craft, like they're up modeling their cars every year. I think that's ridiculous. I think, I think it's like we're evolving our perception along with
Yeah.
that. They are, yeah, and
And
they're
if you
giving
look
us.
at, if you draw, there's a very clear parallel here also that would kind of suggest that what they're doing is presenting what they think we can uh,
Exactly. That's
associate
my feeling.
with something, the crop circle phenomenon.
Yes.
I mean, it's very well documented. It
Yes.
started out very simple, and then it just exploded, and is, I would say, I mean, its heyday was probably a few years ago in terms of
Yeah,
numbers.
before 2012, it kind of dropped off. I went to the crop circles because I was so fascinated with them. I went 2 years, 2008 and 2010. And I was going to say in 2008, I was there for the August 8th, 2008, and everyone felt like, oh yeah, there's going to be a crop circle on 888, 88 2008. And so I slept out on the hill with a bunch of other people waiting for the ships to arrive. And there's some popular hills. There's East Hill, there's Milk Hill, there's a bunch of hills you can sleep out of. We chose East Hill because that's where I think the 777 crop circle appeared. So we said, well, if the 888 circle is going to be appearing there, so we slept out on one hill. It didn't appear on our hill. It appeared on the hill over at the bottom of the hill. You know what the crop circle was? It was an eight. It was eight, and it's like, but it wasn't an ordinary eight. It was a Mobius strip eight. It was clearly a Mobius strip where it went back in on itself. So it was, and on the ground, when we finally discovered that in the morning, it's like we didn't know what it was until we actually saw the pictures from the helicopters or drones over the 888. And when I stood in the center of that, I definitely had a Kundalini sensation.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So, but they gave us the eight, getting back to the question of the whole, because
Okay.
we were expecting the eight, right, an eight, and they gave us that because that sort of was in what we were expecting.
Yeah.
But
Well, and,
no
and
one,
that goes with a lot of experiences that people have reported of having meditations where they request certain things and it is answered, and something shows up in the field the next day that is exactly what, say, a group of meditators
Exactly.
nearby have
Yeah.
been meditating on or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
There's several stories about that, which just speaks to the level of consciousness that we're dealing with here, that we're talking about.
Exactly. So there's this, I do think and agree with you, there's an interface between them and us where they're reading our perceptions and they're giving us what we can handle and they're not giving us more than we can handle. Maybe sometimes they're pushing the envelope, like let's fly over the city of Phoenix and see what comes of it. So they're pushing us, but not too much. They're not landing on the White House lawn until it becomes self evident, like I said before.
Hmm.
It's not self evident to the masses of the population.
Right.
So,
I wanted to talk about this idea. It occurs to me as and this is, I'm not a UFO aficionado, nor am I an ET aficionado. I'm interested in it, have been for years. I'm kind of out on the edge, and I keep an eye on it. Let's say that. But I also know a lot of people, and one of the weird things about my life is that I keep having people show up in my life that have had either strange capabilities or strange experiences across the board, right? And one of them is extraterrestrial contact telepathically. And yes, I know a lot of people who've seen lights in the sky and all those kinds of things. But the telepathic contact, I think, is really interesting. And that might be one way that they're kind of testing the boundaries. A
mhm.
good friend of mine, probably the most spectacular story of this, was a good friend of mine was contacted by someone who was posing as his crystals, because he had this connection with his crystals. He just kind of had communed with them in his mind quite often. He was in a sound bath. He was doing a healing, and his crystals talked to him. He went, "What the fuck is happening here?" And they had this conversation, and he was freaked out by it, but whatever. The next day or that night or something, the same voice comes into him and says, "Actually, I'm not your crystals. I was fucking with you," not in those words. And it turns out to be a consciousness of an entity from another place in the universe, and gave him the type of communication that we hear about. I read about it in your book. I've heard about it before and other talks. I think the story was someone in the military, Area 51 or something, that was told to look into they had a live ET and look into the ET's eyes, and gets
Right.
blasted with this type. And that's what he experienced. He described for me, imagine every sense that you have, and then some that you didn't know you have, and they're being all absolutely flooded with senses all at once, with information and imagery and you name it. And
Yeah.
it was absolutely overwhelming. And he carried on a relationship for a very short time with this entity, and then he had to back away from that relationship and no longer contacts him. But
Why? Because it was too much?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, it was too much.
that's the problem
And
with those
and he
relationships.
wasn't quite confident that the entity was of the purest light and love.
Well, yeah, you do need to ask for a resume or
It's a
something
big
before you.
universe, lot going on, right? So,
It is.
and
But they were contacting him for a reason, maybe. But actually, I was going to say to you, if you want to talk to a crystal that has an entity or consciousness, go and right there in Sedona, look up Carolyn Ford. She has the crystal skull Einstein. I can give you her number later. Einstein will talk to you if you put your head up to it. You, it's a big skull. They call it Einstein because it's probably one of the biggest crystal skulls ever created. And I think she's still doing session. It's a little expensive. You put your third eye up to Einstein's, the skull's third eye, and you just get a download. There's just it happened to me. It happens to hundreds of other people with Einstein and other crystal skulls. But
very cool.
yes,
I am doing that.
yes, okay, yes,
Yeah.
do that.
So all of this was kind of leading into the observation, I guess, that a lot of people who have had an experience have had more than one experience.
Right.
And some
That
people have a lot of them, right? And so it leads to this idea. I think Grant Cameron was talking about in his chapter that none of this is coincidence. It's not
right.
like, oh, I happened to be in the right place at the right time. No, if you saw the thing in the sky or had the experience, then it's because that was for you.
You were meant to see it. This is what Grant says, and I tend to think that's probably true. There are no innocent bystanders. If you've seen a UFO, if you're having this conversation with me about UFOs, you're meant to have it. No, I'm kidding about that. But no, if you've seen a UFO, somehow you're part of the phenomena. You're not separate from the phenomena. The phenomena, it's it's seeping in to the collective. It is all of us. It's part of all of us. So
Yeah, I think it would be a really interesting exercise to start polling everyone that you know. And yeah, obviously in your circles is going to be a very high percentage, but I think a lot of people would be surprised. People in the mainstream, if they went out and asked all of their friends and family, how have you ever seen, you know, a UFO or the strange lights in the sky, or had a dream or a feeling that you'd been out of your bed or whatever, they might find they might be very surprised at how many people have had those experiences and
well,
just
I
to
think
talk
they
about
have done polls. I think it's like 1 out of 6 have seen a UFO or know someone who's seen a UFO,
it.
like around the country. And there's a whole desk reference book for reports on UFOs. There's been over 100,000 in the last 20 years reported in almost every county in the US.
Hmm.
And when we say reported, I say those are the people that had enough time and inclination to call up a reporting center and say, I've seen UFOs, never reported them. So I'd say for everyone that's reported, there's probably 100 of that same sighting that go unreported. So there's so much out there and it's increasing.
Yes.
And the dreamscapes of people are increasing. I just talked to a Chinese ufologist who says it's not really safe to talk about UFOs in China, but people have been telling her their dreams. It's okay to tell someone their dreams about UFOs and ET contact. So that's on the rise. That's increasing. So
Mhm.
it's a worldwide phenomena for sure.
Yeah,
For
it's
sure.
coming. The time has come.
It's come, it's arrived, we're here.
Hmm.
That's why we're doing this, to wake
It's
people up, to
so exciting.
evolutionize them. But what
Okay,
else did you
so
want to ask me? Yeah.
we should probably kind of come around to the wrap up here. I have a couple of questions that I really wanted to get to, and the
Okay.
first one is, uh, what what is the most exciting thing that's happening in the field right now?
What's this most exciting thing happening in the UFO field?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on what level. I think the fact that there are much more sightings, the fact that people are dreaming about it. But as far as disclosure, um, there's the guy Luis Elizondo, and he has a non-disclosure agreement with the government that he can't reveal the secrets that he had when he was with ATIP. But this guy Mike Gallagher, a representative from Wisconsin, is coming up with something called the Gallagher Amendment, where people with NDEs and non-disclosure agreement NDAs will be able to speak without any retribution. So that's sort of like if Elizondo talks, he's the guy. I know it's government, but he's gonna blow the whole thing wide open. He is like a racehorse at the gate, just waiting to go, because he has said more than anyone so far in this move. He's moved the ball down the field. I'm not saying we'll score a touchdown if he comes out, but the ball is moving down the field. He's like the quarterback, and I mean, as many people have had more experiences, but he's the guy inside government. And maybe I don't think he's a plant. I think he's really a rogue agent who could spill the beans on disclosure and say, I knew it all along. I
Hmm.
want to say it could be someone said, the biggest I told you so moment in history. I didn't make that up, but I'm going to use it.
Getting ready for that. Exciting. Um, and then the last question is, what are you working on that you're excited about? What's next?
Well, this next book I'm doing is actually developing a taxonomy.
Taxonomy.
Uh, it's like because we don't know what it is, like I think you said it very brilliant. We can notice what it does, and there's one very not well known case, but there's a case I'm really excited about that sort of I think is the smoking gun. That's what I'm calling it, the smoking gun. So
Can you
that's what I'm
tell us
working on.
about that case?
What about that?
Can you tell us about that case?
Well, I'm working on the book, and it is
You gonna hold that one?
well, it is really exciting, and I don't want to, it will be the smoking gun. Let's just say, I mean, I think so. When we bring it out of the closet, it will be. I'm
Fantastic.
excited about, um, like putting it out there
Do
because
you have a working title for this book?
Um, it's sort of like beyond making contact in a way.
Okay.
It's about new perceptions. It's about everything we've been talking about. It's about um, uh, cognizing new realities as sort of a subtitle. How do we cognize the new realities of the unknown? It's like, but there is a case I'm working on that I think, yeah, will be something that's all I can say at this moment.
All right.
But yeah.
Well, I don't want to take too much of the
No, it's okay. Ask me what other question
I don't
you
want to
want.
take too much attention off of Making Contact because it's a
Okay.
really good read. It's got an all-star lineup. It's and they're and it's very it's very diverse. The chapters are very diverse, which is really a kind of a beautiful thing. It's not, you know, my partner's reading Mary Rodwell's book right now, and you know, it's a little less diverse. What I would say.
Well, she writes
But
a chapter in this book, Mary does.
right, Mary has a chapter in this book, um, and but this is great. It's got a really broad set of ideas and perspectives on the topic, and it's got a lot of really cool stories, which is fun as well. So
Wow.
I encourage
And it's
anyone.
published by a mainstream publisher, St. Martin's Press, and you can get it in Barnes and Noble and on Amazon.
How about that? If that's not signs that the times are changing, then I don't know what is.
No, that is. It was the first UFO book. I mean, they've been published by UFO books have been published before, but I think this is the first one they published, and I think it's done pretty well because hopefully do another book on the same topic
Yeah.
or similar. It goes deeper. I really focus on what's happening in the most intense form of contact when you really meet the other and your mind is blown wide open by that experience. How do
Beautiful.
we deal with that?
The book is called Making Contact. Alan, how can people get in touch with you if they would like to reach out?
Well, every week I do a YouTube show, actually more than once a week, probably like sometimes 5 days a week on my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/new realities. I just did a Making Contact series that you can go to, makingcontactseries.com, where it's just some of the people in the book do an in-depth interview with me. I have 5 parts to that. We go from Nick Pope all the ways to Carolyn Corey and Mary Rodwell and Whitley Strieber and Linda Moulton Howe. They're all part of the series. They've all contributed to this. So it's like now that you've read the book, why not watch the television series? But and then you can email me, of course, at newrealities@earthlink.net, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and buy the book, order the book on Amazon. There's a discount on Amazon. Buy it in Barnes and Noble. Order it if it's not there. Say you want 5 copies for you and your friends, and
That's right.
let's make this a bestseller. David, thank you for your very intelligent questions. And I don't know if we got any answers, but there's always more questions.
That's right. You know what? It's about the question, and it's about the never-ending mystery. And I think that you know, if everyone can just have that in their worldview, that the mystery is absolutely endless, then especially science, especially academia, if they could embrace that reality, that's the one piece of our reality that I think is the is immovable. And
Well,
it's
it's
been
the
passed
mystery
down.
that Yes, it's the mystery that pushes conscious evolution. It's the mystery. It is. It's the never-ending search for but we do make progress. We do know how to use electricity. We don't know what it is still, but we do know how to sort of work with quantum physics. We don't know what that is, but it's like we do make inroads into the mystery only to know that the goalpost has been moved further down the field. So,
Every time. And I think that's important because something that you said, an hour ago is that what or alluded to is that we are actually at a juncture where we as a civilization need to be birthed to the stars, right?
that's right.
There's a
That
lot of
exactly
reasons
is.
for that, but in order to do that, and if you subscribe to the idea that we're kind of sequestered here on Earth by the Galactic Federation, or however you want to put that, that the higher minds are going, no, you guys are warlike apes right now. You got to get your shit together first. That's why evolution is so important, because we need to get off the planet for the planet's sake, for our sake. And in order to do that, we have to evolve first. Otherwise, we don't get to go anywhere. I mean,
Why do we need to get off the planet, though?
why do we need to get off the planet? Well,
Yeah.
so one of the ideas is that a planet is it's a precarious place to be, to have all your eggs in that basket, because, asteroids and stuff. I mean, there's a lot going on in this solar system, and there's a lot going on with the sun itself, and one big solar flare, one big asteroid, and so yeah, we need to get off the planet, or we need to have
But
the ability to get off the planet, and have at least some of us get off the planet.
but maybe that's why we're on the planet. Maybe people have gotten off the planet, planted us here because they didn't want all their eggs, and this is one little basket, and that's why they're coming and going just to check on their little
Check on their
experiment.
garden, check on their spores.
On their experiment, yeah.
We're like spores in the attic.
Yeah, because they didn't want to put all their eggs. So, like, maybe we're reaching that stage where we want to do that, or maybe we've already are it. We're it.
Well, if we are that, then I mean, Terrence McKenna talks about the idea that we're getting ready to literally be birthed, and that's why from Mother Earth, and that's why this is such a strange, hard, tumultuous time. Because if you walked up on a woman, or you're on the street and you're walking along, and all of a sudden there's a woman on the sidewalk about to give birth, it would be a traumatic moment. It would be an emergency. There would be a lot of pain and drama and blood, and right. And then we're in that moment where we're
Mm.
about to be birthed to the stars, and we're going through that kind of tumult, if you will.
We are, and that's why it's so exciting, That's
Yeah,
why
this
that.
is an exciting time to be alive, and it's an exciting place for someone like yourself, and for me increasingly so, to be opening up to what's out on the fringe, running those edges of what is consciousness and what is human capability, and being part of at least the impetus and the intention to evolve this species.
Right. Yeah, and it's not about defining it because anything we say it is old paradigm. That's why let's float in the uncertainty on the cloud of unknowing, as Alan Watts said. Let's float there into this experience because it's gonna start to take form of its own volition, and we don't want to put a form on it or a name or after I wrote this book, Grant Cameron says to me, it may not really be ETs. It may be something that we just don't know. I said, Grant, don't tell me that. I just wrote the whole book about ET. But he's right. This is something we're only calling UFOs, extraterrestrials, ETs, whatever you want to call it. We're just putting a name on something we only have the vaguest, most unsure idea about. And that's okay. At least we're moving in the direction of the unknown.
Absolutely. And that's how it goes. When you go exploring, you have no idea what you're going to find, and you're going to be surprised. And in this realm, it's going to be weird. It's going to blow our mind. We're not going to understand it. But that's what happens. You go into it, and then you start to figure out where the hell you've found yourself.
Right, right. I think there's a line from a Lewis Carroll. Oh no, it's from T.S. Eliot. Let's not ask what is it. Let's go and make our visit, you know.
I love that.
Alfred J. Prufrock, I think that's the last line of that.
All
You know,
right.
so something like that. But thank you for really diving in there together, because this is the kind of interviews I like where, we discover together something that is unpalpable, vague, but you can talk about it, but you can't talk of it, you know?
Directly. Yeah.
And that's the best. I mean, maybe there's people who can in more intelligent ways, but
Mhm.
I think by talking about it, we give people a sense of what it is and maybe what it's not too. I'm only going on my 30 years of research and research with the best people who've done 50, Stanton Friedman, John Mack, uh, I don't meet J. Allen Hynek, but I know his son Paul Hynek. The people who've said, "Oh my God, this is the most fascinating thing I can think of," and what is it? What is it? And we still don't know, but we're closer than the first. What is it to moving down and
Yeah.
discovering what it is
And
or
so we
not?
keep asking because it is the story of the century. It's the story of the millennium.
It's the story of humanity. It is the biggest moment in human history when we meet the other. But we have to, be rise to the occasion. We have to not meet them out of fear or even curiosity, but we have to meet them as an even playing field with the wonder of who we are. It helps. We have to realize who we are. We have to, I think that's part of their strategy, whoever they are. We have to say there's so much more to us as human beings. And when we do that, then we're ready to meet them on an even playing field. And
Yeah.
we really discover who we are.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your time. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much, Ellen. If you'd like to learn more about The Evolutionary, you can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/theevolutionarylife, or on Instagram at The Evolutionary Life, or on the interwebs at theevolutionary.life, because .com is so last season. Thank you again so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, share, like, all that good stuff, and I'll talk to you next time.